He was just a quiet boy covered in dust and bruises, blamed for a theft he didn't commit, abandoned by his own blood and left to rot in silence. But when he vanished into the night, no one expected the truth he would return with. And who would stand beside him when the town turned to watch. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The morning light in Willow Creek was pale and dusty like the rest of the tired little town. Dry wind swept across the cracked fields, carrying the scent of old earth and forgotten dreams. It was the kind of place where nothing changed, and people didn't expect it to. In a small sagging house on the edge of town, a boy named Jonas Wren opened his eyes. He was 9 years old, thin as a stick, with a mop of messy brown hair and eyes too serious for someone his age. He didn't have a bed, only a folded sack and a tattered blanket that barely kept out the cold. Today, even that was gone. He found the blanket in the goat pen covered in dirt and hay. His Aunt Della had used it to patch a hole in the fence. She didn't even look up when Jonas stood there holding the torn pieces. "Use it for something useful," she said, her voice sharp like broken glass. Jonas didn't speak. He never did when he was hurt. He picked up what was left of the blanket and walked back to the corner where he slept. He sat down, curled up in silence, and clutched the smooth stone he kept in his pocket. He called it his hope. It was the only thing he had that hadn't been taken from him. His parents had died in a car accident when he was 5. Since then, he had lived with his Uncle Marshall and Aunt Della. They didn't want him. He knew that. He was just another mouth to feed, another chore to assign. Uncle Marshall never spoke unless it was to yell. Aunt Della always had something bitter to say. "He's just extra weight," she had whispered once loud enough for Jonas to hear. Jonas worked from sunrise to sunset. He fetched water from the old well, chopped wood for the stove, and cleaned the animals' pens. School was never discussed. "Learning won't help a boy like you," his uncle once grunted. "Work is your teacher now." That morning, like every morning, Jonas woke before the sun. His feet were cold, his shirt too, thin for the wind, but he had a job to do. He walked to the well, the sky still dark and silent. He tied the old rope to the bucket and lowered it slowly into the deep hole. As the bucket touched the water, Jonas looked up. The stars were fading into the light of dawn. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Please, if anyone's out there, help me get out, help me be good." He didn't expect an answer. Still, he waited a second just in case. He carried the heavy bucket back with both hands, his arms shaking. When he reached the house, his uncle was waiting. Marshall was a tall man with rough hands and eyes that never softened. "You're late," he said. "You're going to old Fitch's farm today. He needs help. Tell him I sent you." Jonas nodded. His stomach was already twisting. Old man Fitch lived past the hills and was known for being meaner than the goats he raised. Still, Jonas couldn't say no. Saying no meant going to bed without food. Or worse. He left the house with nothing but his hope stone in his pocket. The road was long and rocky. Every step sent pain up his legs. The sun rose higher and his skin burned under the heat. His lips cracked, but he didn't stop. He never did. When he reached the farm, old Fitch didn't smile. He handed Jonas a hoe and pointed to the field. "Dig," he said. Jonas dug. The dirt was dry and hard. His hands blistered quickly. Dust filled his throat. He kept going. Time passed in silence, broken only by the wind and the sound of the hoe hitting the ground. As the sun began to set, old Fitch tossed him a dry piece of bread and a chunk of cheese. Jonas sat under a tree, too tired to feel grateful. He ate slowly, each bite painful from hunger. After a while, old Fitch walked over. He stared at the boy for a long time. "Why do you keep coming back?" he asked, his voice rough. Jonas looked down. "If I don't, I get beaten," he said quietly. Fitch didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away. Jonas walked home, in the dark. No one came looking for him. When he stepped into the house, his aunt barely glanced up. His uncle was snoring in his chair. No one asked if he had eaten or if he was hurt. No one cared. Jonas curled up on the floor with the sack. The pieces of his blanket were still tied around the goat pen. His stomach growled. He pressed the stone to his chest and whispered another prayer. Don't forget me. Please. He didn't dream that night. Just silence. But deep in the fields, where the dust whispered through the dry wheat, something was changing. And Jonas, without knowing it, had just taken the first step toward a life that would never be the same. The sun hung heavy over Willow Creek, painting the small town in gold. In shadows, the air felt thicker than usual, carrying more than just heat. Something else drifted through the wind. Tension, quiet and sharp like a blade. Jonas Wren walked slowly down the dirt path with a bucket of water in his hands. His legs ached from the long walk to Old Fitch's farm the day before. His shoulders still stung from carrying the heavy tools. But he didn't complain. No one listened anyway. As he neared the town square, Jonas noticed a small crowd gathered near the grain warehouse. Voices rose in quick, nervous bursts. He stopped, his fingers tightening around the wooden handle of the bucket. 3 sacks of corn are gone, a man said, wiping sweat from his brow. They were there last night, now they're gone. Someone stole them, another man growled. And it wasn't rats. Jonas stepped closer, his curiosity pulling him in. He stood at the edge of the crowd, silent and unnoticed, until he wasn't. Hey, that boy's always hanging around, someone said. He doesn't have anyone to watch him. A few heads turned. That's right, another voice added. He's always wandering, always alone. Maybe he saw something, or did something. Jonas took a step back. His heart thudded loudly in his chest. I didn't, he started to say, but his voice was lost in the noise. He's just a charity case, someone whispered. His uncle never wanted him. The whispers grew louder, more poisonous. Jonas's throat tightened. He felt like he was drowning in their words. He turned and ran, the bucket slipping from his hand and crashing to the ground. Water spilled across the dirt, soaking into the dry earth like it had never been there. When he reached the house, Uncle Marshall was waiting on the porch, arms crossed and jaw tight. What's this I hear? He asked, his voice sharp and low. You stealing now? Jonas froze. No, sir, he whispered. I didn't. Liar, Marshall snapped. You never do anything right. Been trouble since you showed up. Aunt Della stood in the doorway, her arms folded, her face twisted in a cold frown. Don't try to deny it, she said. People in town are talking. But I didn't take anything, Jonas said, his voice trembling. I don't even go near the warehouse. Marshall didn't care. He took one step forward and raised his hand. The slap came quick and hard across Jonas's back. The boy stumbled forward, catching himself on the porch rail. The pain burned, but he didn't cry out. You think we can trust a thief? Marshall yelled. Jonas didn't answer. He couldn't. His mouth was dry. His chest felt hollow. Aunt Della turned away like she couldn't stand the sight of him. Jonas stood there alone, his head down, the sting of shame sharper than the slap. That night, no one spoke to him. No dinner. No comfort. Only silence. Jonas curled up on the floor in his corner. He held his stone, the one he called hope, against his chest. It felt cool in his hand, the only thing in the world that hadn't turned against him. His stomach growled, but hunger was nothing new. He whispered a prayer into the darkness. Please, if you're listening, I don't know what to do. I don't want to be here anymore. Tears slid down his cheeks, quiet and slow. The house creaked around him, the night pressing in like a heavy blanket. And then, in the silence, something shifted inside him. He couldn't stay. The pain, the blame, the cold, all of it. It was too much. He had no proof, no voice strong enough to fight the lies. They had decided he was guilty, and no matter what he said, nothing would change their minds. So before the sun could rise again, Jonas made a choice. He packed what little he had, a small, ragged sack, the hope stone, a worn card with a prayer written in faded ink. He didn't have shoes, just calloused feet and strong legs from years of walking rough paths. He slipped out the door without a sound. The sky was still dark. Stars blinked softly overhead. The wind was gentle, brushing his face like a quiet goodbye. He didn't know where he was going, only that he was leaving. Each step away from the house felt lighter. Every crunch of dirt underfoot was a small piece of freedom. Behind him was pain. Ahead, anything else. Jonas didn't look back. He passed the edge of Willow Creek. The trees thinned. The land stretched wide and empty. Birds began to sing as the first light touched the hills. By the time his legs began to ache, he had reached an old field. The fence was broken. The grass was tall and wild. It looked forgotten, like him. He dropped to his knees, too tired to go on. His hands dug into the dirt, gripping it like he could hold onto the earth itself. "Please," he whispered one last time. "I just want to be somewhere safe." And then, as sleep pulled him down, he heard something. Footsteps. Soft. Careful. Not angry or rushing. He tried to lift his head, but his body refused. His eyes fluttered shut. And in the final moment before sleep took him, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Gentle. Warm. Someone had found him. But who? And what would they do? The wheat around him whispered in the wind, holding the secret until morning. The wind rolled softly through the tall grass of Hollow Ridge, carrying the scent of dust, old bark, and morning dew. Birds called lazily from nearby trees as the first light of day lit up the sky with pale orange. Near a broken fence on the edge of the field, a boy lay still, curled into himself like a small creature trying to disappear. His name was Jonas Wren. His clothes were thin and dirty, his hands covered in scrapes and dried blisters. Beside him was a cloth sack barely holding together, and inside it, a stone he called his hope, a prayer card folded at the edges, and nothing else. He didn't move when the footsteps approached. His body was too tired, too empty. A man crouched beside him. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with a thick gray beard and deep lines around his eyes. He wore a faded shirt, rough trousers, and a brown hat with sweat stains around the band. He looked like someone who had worked the land his entire life. "Hey there, son," the man said gently. "You all right?" Jonas stirred, his eyes blinking slowly open. The sky was bright now, and the man's face hovered above him like a shadow, outlined in gold. "Don't be scared," the man said. "Name's Calder Bray. I've got a place just over that hill. Looks like you could use a meal and some rest." Jonas tried to sit up, but his arms trembled. Calder offered his hand. Jonas hesitated, then took it. They walked slowly toward the cabin. Calder didn't ask too many questions. He didn't need to. He had seen that look before, too many times. Boys who carried silence like a second skin, who flinched at kindness because they weren't used to it. The cabin was small but strong. Its wooden walls were patched but clean. A small porch wrapped around the front with 2 rocking chairs and a stack of firewood near the door. Behind it, a narrow path led to a garden patch full of young crops and sunflowers swaying in the breeze. Inside, Calder led Jonas to a cot in the corner, laid out a soft blanket and brought him warm soup and a thick slice of bread. Jonas ate slowly at first, as if he expected it to be taken away. Calder didn't rush him. He just sat by the window sipping his own tea. "You got a name?" Calder asked after a while. "Jonas," the boy said, barely above a whisper. "Well, Jonas," Calder replied, "you're safe here. I don't know what brought you out that far, but I reckon you've had a rough go." Jonas nodded. He didn't want to talk about his uncle or the town or the people who had called him a thief. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The days passed quietly. Jonas helped in the garden when he felt strong enough. Calder taught him how to hold a spade properly, how to plant seeds in rows, and how to tell when the soil was too dry. It was hard work, but not like before. Calder never raised his voice. He never hit. He asked, and Jonas helped. In the evenings, they sat on the porch. Calder would talk about the past, about the days when the town was smaller, when he and his brother used to race horses through the open fields. Jonas listened with wide eyes. He didn't speak much, but he liked hearing the stories. It made the silence in his heart feel less heavy. One morning, While Jonas was cleaning the shed, he found an old wooden box beneath a pile of blankets. Inside it were dusty papers, faded maps, and a small metal seal. He showed it to Calder. I wondered where that got to," Calder said, sitting down and unfolding one of the papers. It was a land contract, dated almost 10 years ago. Calder's eyes narrowed as he read the names. "Jonas," he said slowly. "Do you know where your parents lived before they passed?" Jonas shook his head. "This paper says a piece of land in Willow Creek was theirs. It's signed by a man named Harlan Wren." Jonas looked up quickly. "That was my father." Calder studied the contract again, then looked at Jonas with quiet seriousness. "This land was supposed to go to their child, you." Jonas didn't speak. The words felt too big, too far away. "This changes things," Calder said, folding the paper carefully. "It means someone kept this from you. Someone didn't want you to know what was yours." Jonas stared at the floor. A storm of thoughts swirled in his head. His uncle. The house. The looks. The cold meals, the lies. He felt the stone in his pocket, the one he'd always carried. He held it tighter. "You don't have to decide anything now," Calder said, his voice calm, "but I think it's time we took a trip into town." Jonas nodded slowly. The road back to Willow Creek felt different now. Jonas was still afraid, but inside that fear was something new. Not anger, not revenge, just truth. And the truth, Jonas was beginning to understand, was its own kind of power. As the ridge faded behind them and the rooftops of the town came into view, Calder looked down at the boy beside him. "No one can take what belongs to you forever," he said. "Not if you're brave enough to stand for it." Jonas didn't answer, but in his pocket the Hopestone felt warm for the first time. The town square of Willow Creek was busier than usual. Stalls lined the streets, filled with vegetables, bread, and dry goods. People moved between them, talking in low voices, watching each other carefully. But when Calder Bray and Jonas Wren stepped into view, a quiet ripple passed through the crowd. Jonas felt it right away. The stares, the whispers, the cold eyes that once called him a thief. He kept his head down, walking close to Calder. His heart thudded in his chest, but he didn't turn back. "Stand tall, Jonas," Calder said quietly. "They need to see you for who you really are." Jonas looked up and took a breath. The sun was high. The sky was clear. He didn't feel small anymore. As they approached the center of the square, a voice rang out. "There he is." It was Marshall, red-faced and furious. His boots pounded the dirt as he stormed toward them. Behind him, Aunt Della followed, her lips tight, her arms crossed. "You've got nerve showing your face here, boy," Marshall growled. "Thought you could run off after stealing from us? After stealing from this town?" Jonas flinched but stayed where he was. Calder stepped between them. "That's enough," Calder said firmly. Jonas didn't steal anything. The crowd had started to gather now, circling around them like crows waiting for a fight. "You don't know what he's done," Marshall snapped. "He's been a burden since day one, and now he thinks he can walk back into town like he owns the place?" "Actually," Calder said, reaching into his coat pocket, "he does." He pulled out a folded paper and held it up for everyone to see. "This is a legal land deed," Calder said, his voice strong and clear. "Signed by Harlan Wren and his wife, Jonas's parents. It states that upon their passing, the land is to go to their only son." The crowd gasped. Someone dropped a basket of apples. Della's face turned pale. "That land belongs to me," Marshall shouted. "I've worked it for years. I've kept that house standing. He's just a kid." "A kid whose rights you buried," Calder replied. "You knew about this deed, didn't you? And instead of honoring it, you kept Jonas in the dark, treated him like dirt, and used him for labor. You even blamed him for something you did." Jonas felt every eye turn toward him. The shame, the weight he had carried for so long. It was lifting. "It's not true," Marshall barked. "He stole the corn. I saw him near the warehouse." "No," said a calm voice from the back of the crowd. An older man stepped forward, the warehouse manager holding a notebook. I checked the records. The only person with the warehouse key that day was Marshall, he said. I also found fresh boot prints that match Marshall's size. And Jonas, he wasn't even near the warehouse. He was at Old Man Fitch's farm the whole day. Marshall's eyes darted around. His mouth opened, then closed. Sweat rolled down his neck. You framed him, the manager said. You used that boy to cover your own theft. The townspeople stared in silence. Some looked angry, others ashamed. Della stepped back as if distance could save her from the truth. Marshall lowered his head, his fists clenched, but there was no more fight in him. You'll answer for this, the manager said. To the town and the law. Marshall didn't reply. He just walked away, the crowd parting to let him pass. Jonas stood frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. He had always dreamed of being free from the lies, but he never expected this moment. It felt heavy and light at the same time. Calder placed a hand on his shoulder. It's over now, he said. They know the truth. The crowd slowly began to scatter, leaving behind only a few curious faces. Some nodded to Jonas. Others offered soft apologies. But Jonas didn't need their words. What mattered was that the soil beneath his feet, the very earth he had worked with his hands, was his. Later that afternoon, Calder brought Jonas back to the edge of town. They walked up a hill overlooking the fields. This is your land now, Calder said. Your parents wanted you to have it. They believed you'd do something good with it. Jonas stared at the wide field below. It was dry and rough, but he saw something else. A place where he could grow food, build a home, and never feel forgotten again. I want to learn, Jonas said quietly. To farm. To take care of it the right way. Calder smiled. I'll teach you. Jonas knelt down, digging his fingers into the dirt. It felt warm, alive. For the first time, he wasn't working it for someone else. This soil belonged to him. It held the truth. And now, it held hope too. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned to gold, Jonas sat on the porch of Calder's cabin. He held his stone, the one he had carried through every hardship, and placed it gently in a flower pot beside the door. Thank you, he whispered, for seeing me. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led him here, not just to safety, but to a new beginning. And somewhere deep in the soil beneath his feet, Jonas knew something beautiful would grow.